The silence of the house was the first betrayal. It was a sterile, architecturally perfect quiet, a silence he himself had designed. Liam stood in the foyer of the home he had built, a monument to clean lines and minimalist beauty, and felt the unnatural stillness press in on him. He had come home 2 days early. The knee surgery, a minor arthroscopic procedure to repair a torn meniscus, had gone smoother than expected. His surgeon, a man with a booming laugh and improbably steady hands, had declared him fit for home recovery, provided he kept off his feet. Chloe, his wife, was supposed to pick him up on Wednesday. Today was Monday. He had taken a cab, wanting to surprise her, wanting to trade the antiseptic smell of the hospital for the familiar scent of their life together. He leaned on the single crutch, the ache in his knee a dull, distant throb compared to the sharp, sudden clenching in his chest. Something was wrong. The air was stale, holding the ghost of a scent that was not his, not Chloe's. It was a faint, cloying fragrance, expensive cologne trying too hard. He moved through the downstairs living area, his crutch making a soft, rhythmic thud on the polished concrete floors. Everything was in its place. The Eames chair angled just so. The stack of architectural monographs on the coffee table perfectly aligned. It was a space that could be photographed for a magazine at any moment, a quality Chloe cherished, and he sometimes found suffocating. He made his way to the floating staircase, a challenging design of steel and cantilevered oak that was his pride. Each step was a careful, deliberate motion. The silence grew louder as he ascended, amplifying the sound of his own breathing. He reached the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. The room was pristine. The king-size bed, dressed in immaculate white linens, was perfectly made. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was a picture of serene domesticity. And then he saw it. On his nightstand, next to his worn copy of Meditations and a glass of water, sat a watch. It was not his watch. His was a simple, elegant Jungens with a leather strap, a testament to his belief in form following function. This watch was its antithesis. It was a monstrosity of gold and diamonds, a gaudy, oversized chronograph that screamed of new money and deep insecurity. It was a brand he recognized instantly, one favored by hedge fund managers and crypto-millionaires. He had seen it countless times. On the wrist of his brother-in-law, Julian. Liam stared at the watch. It was an alien object in his world, a piece of shrapnel from an explosion he hadn't heard. The implications landed not like a bomb, but like a slow, seeping poison. The cologne, the stillness, the watch on his nightstand, a symbol of ownership, a flag planted on conquered territory. Julian thought he was a failure, a penniless architect designing kitchen extensions for suburbanites. He didn't know that for the past 3 years, Liam had been the ghost, the hidden mind behind the city's most transformative architectural project. He didn't know that within 72 hours, at the public unveiling of the Elysian Tower, the world would learn that the struggling artist his family pitted was about to become one of the most influential figures in the state. He didn't know that this single, arrogant act of leaving his watch behind would set off a chain of events that would utterly dismantle the life he believed was so unassailable. Julian was confident. What he didn't know was that he had just declared war on a man who had already won. It's a story we see play out in different ways, isn't it? The quiet ones, the underestimated ones, finally showing their strength. I wonder if you've ever felt like that, like you had a secret you were just waiting for the right moment to reveal. Let me know down in the comments where you're watching from. I love to see how far these stories travel. Now, grab a drink, get comfortable, because the foundation of this perfect life was about to be tested, and the demolition was going to be spectacular. To understand the depth of the betrayal, you have to understand the years of quiet humiliations that preceded it. It had been a slow erosion, a death by 1,000 cuts, each one delivered with the casual cruelty of people who believe their wealth makes them infallible. The first truly memorable instance had occurred about 2 years prior, at a family dinner at the estate of his father-in-law, Arthur Vance. The Vance family home wasn't just a house, it was a statement. A sprawling Tudor mansion set on 50 acres of manicured land, It was a fortress of old money, designed to make visitors feel small. Liam had driven there with Chloe in his 7-year-old Saab, a car he loved for its quirky engineering and understated comfort. He'd parked it near the garages, a distance away from Arthur's Bentley and Julian's glistening new Maserati. As they walked toward the grand oak doors, Julian stepped out onto the portico, a smirk already playing on his lips. He was holding a flute of champagne, looking every bit the lord of the manor. "Liam, Chloe, so glad you could make it," he'd boomed, his voice echoing slightly in the evening air. "I was worried you'd had car trouble. I see you're still driving that thing." He gestured vaguely in the direction of the Saab. "Is it a classic now, or just old?" Chloe's hand tightened on Liam's arm. "Julian, be nice," she'd murmured, her voice lacking any real force. It was her standard defense, a flimsy shield that did nothing to stop the blows. Liam had offered a calm smile. "It runs perfectly, Julian. Reliable. That's more important to me than flash." Of course, Julian said, patting Liam's shoulder in a gesture of false camaraderie. Reliability. The mantra of the man who can't afford flash. The insult was delivered with a dazzling smile, making it seem almost like a joke. But it wasn't. It was a probe, a test of his defenses, and Liam's refusal to rise to the bait only seemed to amuse him more. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 30. The table stretched out under a crystal chandelier, laden with silverware so ornate it looked medieval. Arthur Vance sat at the head of the table, a man whose presence filled the room even in silence. He had the same dismissive eyes as his son, but where Julian was loud and performative in his arrogance, Arthur's was a quiet, suffocating condescension. The conversation, as always, revolved around money. Julian was boasting about a recent acquisition, a tech startup his fund had snapped up. He spoke in jargon, throwing around terms like synergy and leveraged buyout and disruptor, all while glancing at Liam as if he were a particularly slow student in the back of the class. "The key, you see, is identifying weakness," Julian explained, swirling a deep red wine in his glass. "You find a company with good bones, but poor leadership, a company that doesn't know its own value. You move in, you strip out the fat, you replace the dead weight, and you maximize its potential. It's a bit like, well, it's not something you'd understand, Liam. It's a killer's game." Liam had just taken a sip of water. He placed the glass down carefully. He could feel the eyes of the family on him, waiting for him to shrink. Chloe was staring at her plate, her knuckles white as she gripped her fork. "It sounds like you're describing architecture, in a way," Liam said, his voice even and measured. Julian let out a short, barking laugh. "Architecture? What, you mean like designing a new deck for some dentist in the suburbs? I don't think that's quite the same scale, mate." "No," Liam agreed, meeting his gaze across the long table. "I mean understanding the core structure, the foundation, the load-bearing walls. You can't just strip things away without knowing what the building can handle. You could cause a collapse." Arthur, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. It was a sound that commanded immediate attention. "The boy has a point, Julian, albeit a quaint one. But the world of finance is not a building. It's a jungle. There are lions and there are gazelles. It's best to know which one you are." The patriarch's eyes flickered to Liam, and the implication was clear. Liam was a gazelle, destined to be devoured. Later that evening, as they were leaving, Liam had noticed a leather tube leaning against the wall in the hall. It contained the preliminary schematics for the Elysian Tower, a project so secret he hadn't even told Chloe its full scope. He'd brought it with him, intending to work on it late into the night after they returned home. Julian saw him pick it up. "More of your drawings, Liam?" he'd asked, a note of patronizing amusement in his voice. "Still dreaming of building skyscrapers?" "Something like that," Liam had replied, his hand tightening on the cool leather of the tube. It felt like a sword hilt. It was his secret, his power, and their inability to see it was his greatest advantage. On the drive home, the silence in the car was heavy. Chloe was the first to speak. "You shouldn't let him get to you," she said softly. "I don't," Liam said, which was mostly true. It wasn't anger he felt, but a profound sense of disappointment. "But I do wish you would say something, Chloe. Tell him to stop. And cause a scene? Liam, that's just how he is. It's how my whole family is. They're competitive. It doesn't mean anything." "It means something to me," he'd said, his voice quiet. "It means they don't respect me. And when you say nothing, it feels like you agree with them." "That's not fair," she protested, her voice rising. "I'm caught in the middle. You have no idea what it's like. They're my family, and I'm your husband." The argument had faded into a tense, unhappy truce, as it always did. Chloe couldn't see that her family wasn't just competitive, they were bullies, and her silence was not neutrality. It was complicity. She didn't understand that he wasn't asking her to choose a side, but to stand on his. He looked out at the passing streetlights, the blueprint tube resting on the seat beside him, a silent promise of a future they couldn't even begin to imagine. He knew then that this was a battle he would have to fight alone. The humiliations continued, becoming a sort of background radiation in his life with Chloe's family. They were masters of the subtle jab, the backhanded compliment, the gesture of feigned generosity that was actually a display of power. The pinnacle of this art form arrived on Liam's 35th birthday. Chloe had insisted on hosting a small party at their house, a gathering of her family and a few of their mutual friends. Liam had wanted a quiet dinner for two, but Chloe argued it was important to make an effort with her family. The house filled with the Vance clan's loud voices and expensive perfumes. Arthur and his wife, Eleanor, surveyed the minimalist space as if it were a curious but ultimately flawed museum exhibit. Julian arrived last, making a grand entrance, and immediately began holding court. He talked about his recent trip to Monaco for the Grand Prix, his new tailor on Savile Row, the impossible waiting list for a Patek Philippe watch he had somehow managed to circumvent. Liam moved through the party, playing the gracious host, his smile feeling more and more like a mask. He saw the way his friends, people from his world of art and design, watched the Vances with a kind of anthropological fascination. They were two different species, communicating across an impassable divide. Then came the gifts. Arthur and Eleanor gave him a case of wine so expensive that each bottle was worth more than his monthly car payment. It was a gift that wasn't a gift. It was a reminder of the financial gulf between them. "Something for your cellar," Arthur had said, knowing full well Liam didn't have one. Finally, Julian stepped forward, a small, elegantly wrapped box in his hand. "Happy birthday, brother-in-law," he said, his smile wide and predatory. "I know you're a fan of classic timepieces, and I saw this and thought of you." Liam took the box. It felt light. He could feel everyone's eyes on him. Chloe was beaming, pleased that her brother was finally making a real gesture of friendship. Liam knew better. He carefully undid the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a black velvet cushion, was a watch. It was a cheap, laughably bad knockoff of a vintage Rolex, the kind of thing you'd buy from a street vendor for $20. The gold plating was already flaking at the edges, and the second hand was ticking in loud, clumsy jerks. A few of Julian's cousins snickered. Arthur coughed to cover a laugh. Eleanor's face was a mask of polite indifference. Liam looked at the watch, then up at Julian. He saw the triumphant gleam in his brother-in-law's eyes. This was the point of the whole performance. It was a public castration. He was being mocked not only for his perceived poverty, but for his taste, his principles, his very identity as a man who valued quiet quality over loud branding. Liam felt a cold, clear calm settle over him. He knew this was a critical moment. Any show of anger or hurt would be a victory for Julian. He picked up the watch, his movements deliberate. "Thank you, Julian," he said, his voice perfectly level. "That's very thoughtful." He unstrapped his simple Jungans and, to everyone's astonishment, strapped the fake Rolex onto his wrist. The cheap metal felt cold against his skin. "There," he said, holding up his arm. "How does it look?" The room went silent. Julian's smirk faltered. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. He'd wanted Liam to be flustered, embarrassed, angry. Instead, Liam had embraced the insult, worn it like armor. He had robbed the gesture of its power. "It looks great," Julian stammered, caught off guard. "It certainly is a statement," Liam said, his eyes locking with Julian's. It tells time. That's the important thing, right? Function over form. He was throwing Julian's own condescending words back at him. But this time, Liam was the one in control. He smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile. I'll treasure it. He wore the watch for the rest of the party. He saw Chloe looking at him with a mixture of confusion and, perhaps, a flicker of admiration. She had expected him to be wounded, and instead, he seemed stronger. What she didn't know was that earlier that day, Liam had received a call from Marcus Sterling, the billionaire developer behind the Elysian Tower project. The final city permits had been approved. The financing was secured. The project was officially a go. While Julian was playing his petty games with a $20 watch, Liam had quietly become a partner in a $2 billion enterprise. The fake Rolex on his wrist was a perfect, beautiful irony. It was a reminder that the Van Cess saw only the surface, and that beneath the surface, a skyscraper was being built. The final escalation before the discovery of the watch came a few months later. It was a Sunday brunch at the Vance estate, a mandatory family ritual. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and self-satisfaction. After the meal, Arthur had asked Liam to join him in his study. This was an unusual request. Arthur's study was his inner sanctum, a wood-paneled room filled with leather-bound books he'd never read and trophies from sports he'd never played. Liam entered and found Arthur standing by the large bay window, looking out over his immaculate lawns. Julian was there too, leaning against a large mahogany desk, a smug look on his face. This felt like an ambush. "Liam, my boy, come in," Arthur said, turning from the window. He gestured to one of the leather armchairs. Liam remained standing. "Thank you for joining us," Arthur began, adopting the tone of a benevolent king addressing a humble subject. "Julian and I have been talking. We're concerned. About you. About Chloe." Liam's posture remained relaxed, but a cold watchfulness settled in his gut. "Concerned? Is everything all right?" "That's just it, son. It's not," Arthur said, shaking his head with theatrical gravity. "Chloe is a Vance. She's used to a certain quality of life, a certain standard. And while your, architectural pursuits are admirable in their own way, they don't seem to be bearing fruit." "My business is doing fine, Arthur," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm. He had intentionally kept his new firm small, taking on only a few minor projects publicly to maintain his cover while he worked tirelessly on the Elysian project. To the outside world, it looked like he was barely scraping by. Julian pushed himself off the desk. "Fine? Liam, we know what a small-time architect makes. It's barely enough to cover the mortgage on that glass box you live in, let alone provide for my sister in the manner to which she is accustomed. We saw your last client's project online. A sunroom. A sunroom in Glendale." He said the word sunroom as if it were a communicable disease. Liam didn't flinch. It was a beautiful sunroom. The clients were very happy. Arthur held up a hand. "That's neither here nor there. The point is, we want to help. For Chloe's sake," he paused for dramatic effect. "I have an opening in my company, Vance Consolidated, in the facilities management department. It's a junior position, of course. You'd be overseeing office maintenance, coordinating repairs, that sort of thing. But it's a steady paycheck, good benefits, a foot in the door of a real company." The air in the room seemed to crackle. The sheer, breathtaking condescension of the offer was stunning. They were offering him a glorified janitorial management position. It wasn't an act of generosity. It was an act of dominance. It was a way to finally bring him under their control, to make him a paid employee, a subordinate, to tame the odd, artistic creature their daughter had inexplicably married. Liam looked from Arthur's expectant face to Julian's triumphant smirk. They genuinely believed they were doing him a favor. They thought he should be grateful. In that moment, he saw them with perfect, painful clarity. They were men who could only measure worth in dollars and job titles. They were blind to integrity, to passion, to the quiet dignity of a man who builds things with his own mind and hands. He took a slow breath. "Arthur," he said, his voice imbued with a calm that unnerved them, "that is a very generous offer, but I'm going to have to decline." Arthur's face clouded over. "Decline? Don't be a fool, boy. This is a lifeline. I appreciate you thinking of me. Liam continued, his tone unwavering. But I am an architect. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. I would no sooner manage your facilities than you would design a sunroom. We all have our calling. Julian scoffed. A calling that doesn't pay the bills. My bills are paid, Liam said simply. He then did something he had never done before. He went on the offensive. I have to ask, was this Chloe's idea? Chloe knows what's best for her. Arthur snapped, his composure cracking. She knows she married beneath her station. She's just too soft-hearted to admit it. It was a devastating admission, and it confirmed Liam's deepest fears about the poison his wife had been fed her whole life. I see, Liam said, his voice turning cold. Well, thank you for the offer. If you'll excuse me, I need to find my wife. He turned and walked out of the study, leaving the two men sputtering in his wake. He found Chloe by the pool, talking with her mother. He walked straight up to her. We're leaving, he said, his voice low and tight. What? Why? What happened? She asked, her eyes wide with alarm. I'll tell you in the car. The drive home was a storm of raw emotion. He told her about the job offer. He told her what her father had said, that she knew she'd married beneath her. He watched her face crumble, saw the tears well in her eyes. They're just trying to help. Liam, she cried, falling back on her ingrained defense. They worry about us, about me. They're trying to control us. Chloe, they're trying to break me, and you're letting them. They offer me a janitor's job, and you think they're helping? They insult me. They insult our life together, and you say nothing. What do you want me to do? Cut them off? They're my family. I want you to be my family, he'd yelled, his voice finally breaking, the years of frustration pouring out. I want you to stand with me, not between me and them. They drove the rest of the way in a terrible, wounded silence. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed, a cold canyon between them. It was the lowest point their marriage had ever reached. A week later, he went in for his knee surgery. And 2 days after that, he came home early and found Julian's watch on his nightstand. The final piece of the puzzle, the one that explained the coldness in his wife and the arrogance of her brother, clicked into place with sickening finality. Now, back in the silent, sunlit bedroom, Liam stared at the gaudy gold watch. The shock had subsided, replaced by an arctic calm. The anger was there, a white-hot core deep inside him, but it was contained, controlled. It was fuel. For years, he had played defense. He had absorbed their insults, deflected their condescension, and patiently waited. He had believed that his success, when it was finally revealed, would be enough. He would prove them wrong, and in doing so, earn their respect. He would win Chloe's unqualified allegiance. He saw now how naive that was. This wasn't about his income or his job title. This was about power. This act, this affair, this blatant disrespect was not born of his failure, but of their pathology. Julian leaving his watch on the nightstand of the man he was cuckolding was an act of supreme, pathological arrogance. It was a statement that he could take whatever he wanted, Liam's wife, his home, his dignity, and there was nothing Liam could do about it. He was the lion. Liam was the gazelle. Liam limped over to his dresser. He opened the top drawer, pushing aside neatly folded shirts. At the back was a small, velvet pouch. He opened it and tipped his own watch, the Jungan's, into his palm. He admired its clean face, the slender hands, the quiet confidence of its design. It was a reflection of his own ethos. Simplicity, integrity, strength that didn't need a shout. He strapped it to his wrist. It felt right, grounding. Then he walked back to the nightstand. He picked up Julian's watch. It felt heavy, vulgar. He could feel the ghost of his brother-in-law's skin, the lingering scent of his cologne. He looked at the diamonds glinting in the sunlight. Each one felt like a shard of glass in his heart. He thought of Chloe, her silences, her divided loyalties, her tears in the car. Had it all been a lie? Was she a victim of her family's toxic influence, or a willing participant in his humiliation? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. But he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that he could not allow this to stand. His plan had always been to reveal his success at the Elysian Tower press conference. He would let his work speak for itself. But that plan was made for a different world, a world where the conflict was merely about professional respect. This was now something far more elemental. This was about his home, his marriage, his honor. He sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress giving slightly under his weight. He looked around the room he had designed, the home he had built as a sanctuary for himself and the woman he loved. It had been violated, contaminated. He looked at the leather tube containing the Elysian blueprints, which he'd left leaning in the corner of the bedroom before leaving for the hospital. It stood there like a silent sentinel. His phone was on the other nightstand. He reached for it, his movements slow and precise. He had a few calls to make. His original timeline had just been accelerated. The slow, methodical reveal he had envisioned was no longer appropriate. This required a different approach. Not demolition, surgery, a precise, devastating incision to remove the cancer. He scrolled through his contacts, his thumb hovering over a name. Marcus Sterling, then another. Benjamin Carter, his lawyer. The quiet before the storm was over. The storm was here, and Liam knew he would not be the one broken by it. He would be the one directing the lightning. The first call was to his lawyer, Benjamin Carter. Ben was a shark in a tailored suit, a man whose placid demeanor concealed a razor-sharp legal mind. He listened without interruption as Liam calmly, factually, laid out the situation, not the emotional turmoil, but the strategic coordinates of the new reality. The infidelity, the Vance family's financial entanglement, the upcoming Elysian announcement. So, the timeline has moved up, Ben said, his voice a low hum over the phone. The press conference is Wednesday. What are you thinking, Liam? I'm thinking that a private financial disclosure before a public one might be in order, Liam said, his gaze fixed on Julian's watch, which he had placed in the center of the bed like a piece of evidence. Julian's fund, Vance Capital, I know for a fact he's heavily shorting the downtown commercial real estate market. He thinks he has inside information that the Elysian project is dead. He's called it a vanity project that would never get funded. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Liam could practically hear Ben's mind working, the tumblers of the legal lock clicking into place. His source of information must be flawed, Ben said, the understatement thick with meaning. Deeply, Liam confirmed. When our announcement hits, with the mayor and Governor Sterling in attendance, confirming full state and private funding, what happens to his position? He'll be wiped out, Ben said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. A short position on that scale, against that kind of news, the exposure will be catastrophic. He won't just lose his client's money. He'll be personally bankrupted. Leverage to the hilt, I imagine. That's my assumption, Liam said. In Arthur's company, Vance Consolidated. I know from Chloe that they've been trying to acquire the parcel of land adjacent to the Elysian site. They've been buying up options, thinking it's undervalued industrial wasteland. They plan to lobby for rezoning after the Elysian deal officially collapses. But that land isn't wasteland, Ben said, catching on immediately. It's the designated site for Phase 2 of your project, the residential and retail complex. Exactly. And my partnership agreement with Sterling gives me, personally, the right of first refusal on that entire parcel. A right I plan to exercise the moment the announcement is made at the original valuation. Their options will become worthless paper. A low whistle came over the phone. Liam, this isn't just a divorce strategy. This is a corporate decapitation. This is a response. Liam corrected him, his voice cold and hard. A proportional response. I need you to draw up the paperwork, Ben. All of it. The official notice of my intent to exercise the land options. A full accounting of my stake in the Elysian partnership, my personal net worth, and a separation agreement. The last two words hung in the air. Liam, are you sure? Ben asked, his tone softening slightly. Liam looked at the watch on the bed. He thought of Chloe's face, her easy excuses for her family, her failure to stand with him. He thought of her silence. I'm sure I need to have it ready, he said. What she does next will determine whether I use it. He ended the call and sat in the silence, the weight of his own decisions settling upon him. This was not revenge. Revenge was hot and chaotic. This was justice. It was cold, structural, and absolute. It was architecture applied to a life. He heard a car pull into the driveway. Chloe's Range Rover. His heart, which he had thought was a block of ice, gave a painful lurch. He stood up, using the crutch for support, and limped to the top of the stairs. He heard the front door open, the sound of her keys dropping into the ceramic bowl on the console table. "Liam," she called out, her voice filled with confusion. "Your car isn't here. Are you home?" He didn't answer. He just waited. He heard her footsteps on the polished concrete, then her pause at the bottom of the floating staircase. She looked up and saw him. "Oh my God, Liam. You're home. What happened? I was supposed to pick you up Wednesday. Is everything okay?" She started up the stairs, a bright, worried smile on her face. It was a flawless performance, but he had seen the script. He waited until she reached the landing, her face level with his. She went to hug him, but he held up a hand to stop her. Her smile faltered, confusion clouding her eyes. "What is it? Are you in pain?" "I'm fine," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. He turned and limped back into the bedroom. She followed, a sense of unease starting to radiate from her. "Liam, you're scaring me. Talk to me." He walked to the bed and pointed at the watch. He didn't say a word. He just pointed. Chloe's eyes followed his finger. She saw the watch. For a fraction of a second, her mask of concerned innocence held, then shattered. He saw it happen. The blood drained from her face. A flicker of pure, animal panic in her eyes. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "Someone left their watch," Liam said, his voice quiet. It was the quiet of a judge delivering a verdict. "On my nightstand. In my house. Do you have any idea who it might belong to?" Her denial was a reflex, a desperate, flailing attempt to rewind time. "A watch? I don't know. I've never seen it before. Maybe one of the cleaners." "The cleaners came last Thursday," Liam said, his voice still unervingly calm. "I was here. They didn't leave a $10,000 watch behind. Try again." "10,000. I don't know, Liam. Why are you looking at me like that?" The tears were starting now, the weapon she had always used to end their fights, to make him the aggressor. It wouldn't work this time. "I'm looking at you like this," he said, taking a step closer, "because my wife, who I just spoke to from the hospital 2 hours ago, told me she was going to be working late tonight at the gallery. But her office is dark because I had my assistant drive past it on my way home. I'm looking at you like this because I came home from surgery to my empty, silent house, and I found this." He picked up the watch and held it out to her. "This ostentatious piece of garbage that your brother wears like a crown. Now for the last time, Chloe, tell me what Julian's watch was doing on my nightstand." Her face crumpled. The denial was gone, replaced by a torrent of panicked sobs. "Liam, please. It's not what you think. Isn't it?" he asked, his voice ablaze. "Then what is it? Was he just here for a friendly visit while I was in the hospital? Did he take his watch off to help you move some furniture and just forgot it? Please don't do this," she wept, reaching for him. He stepped back out of her reach. "I'm not doing anything," he said. "You did this. He did this. All I'm doing is turning on the lights." The phone in his pocket buzzed. He knew who it was. It was a message from Julian. Chloe's phone, on the bed, buzzed at the exact same time. The synchronicity was almost poetic. Liam pulled out his phone. The message was from an unknown number, but he knew. "Heard you had to get your knee scoped. Tough break. Hope the little woman is taking good care of you." The taunt was so brazen, so utterly confident, that Liam almost laughed. Julian wasn't just unafraid of being caught. He was reveling in the danger. He was a man who had never faced a real consequence in his life. Liam looked at Chloe, who was staring at her own phone in horror, then back at him. Her face was a ruin of guilt and terror. "He's my brother," she whispered, as if that explained anything. "He is not your brother," Liam said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more weight than any shout. "A brother doesn't do this. He is a predator. And you opened the door for him." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with the watch and the buzzing phone and the wreckage she had made. The conversation was over. The presentation was about to begin. The family meeting was Julian's idea. He'd called it for Tuesday evening, the night before the Elysian press conference. He framed it as an emergency summit at the Vance estate to deal with the Chloe situation, From his perspective, the timing was perfect. Liam, hobbled and presumably demoralized, had discovered the affair. Chloe was a hysterical wreck. It was the perfect opportunity for the family to swoop in, play the saviors, and finally sever their daughter from her failed marriage. From his leather chair in Arthur's study, Julian felt a surge of triumph. Everything was going according to his plan. Liam had been a temporary inconvenience, a strange phase Chloe had gone through. Now, it was time for a correction. He'd already consulted with his father's divorce attorney, a man known for his scorched earth tactics. They would paint Liam as unstable, controlling, perhaps even abusive in his reaction to the unfortunate misunderstanding. They would bury him in legal fees he couldn't possibly afford. They would take the house. After all, it was Vance's money that had covered the down payment, a fact they would happily embellish. "He's emotionally volatile," Julian said to his father, swirling an amber liquid in a crystal tumbler. Chloe said he was cold, menacing. "He scared her. We have a duty to protect her." Arthur nodded, his face a mask of grim concern. "The man is a failure. Failure breeds resentment. It was only a matter of time before it turned ugly. We should have stepped in sooner." He looked at Julian. "The watch was a mistake. Sloppy." "It was a calculated risk," Julian countered, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "It forced the issue. It brought the crisis to a head so we could resolve it. Now, Chloe will come back home, and we can set her up with someone suitable. Someone from our world." Their arrogance was a physical presence in the room. It was in the rich scent of the leather, the muted glow of the banker's lamp on the mahogany desk, the confident, low tones of their voices. They were discussing the dismantling of a man's life as if they were planning a corporate merger. They were utterly blind to the reality of the situation, cocooned in the certainty that their wealth was an impenetrable shield. They saw Liam as a bit player in their grand drama, a non-entity they could simply erase. Chloe was there, of course. She sat on a brocade sofa, her face pale and swollen from crying. She had fled to her parents' house the night before, and they had enveloped her in their toxic sympathy, reinforcing the narrative that she was the victim. Liam was the villain, the man who had overreacted, who had failed to provide for her, who had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. She was weak, lost, and she clung to her family's version of events because the truth that she had betrayed a good man for the shallowest of reasons was too much to bear. When Liam was announced by the housekeeper, a palpable tension filled the room. Julian stood up, a self-satisfied smile on his face. He was ready for the confrontation. He expected a broken man, either raging or pleading. He was prepared for either. Liam entered the study. He was not on crutches. He walked with a slight limp, but his posture was erect, his movement steady. He was dressed in a simple, perfectly tailored dark gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and a sober navy tie. He looked not like a man coming to a fight, but like a man coming to a board meeting he was chairing. In his hand, he carried the leather blueprint tube. He didn't look at Chloe. His eyes swept over Julian and Arthur, his expression unreadable. "Liam," Arthur began, taking charge. "Thank you for coming. We need to discuss this unfortunate situation in a civilized manner." "I agree," Liam said, his voice calm and resonant. "Civilized is an excellent idea." Julian stepped forward, unable to resist taking the lead. "Look, Liam, let's cut the crap. You found out. Chloe made a mistake. She was unhappy. You were distant. These things happen." "Do they?" Liam asked, his eyes locking onto Julian's. "Do they happen between a man and his wife's brother? In the bed they share? While one of them is in the hospital?" He posed the questions not with heat, but with a chilling, analytical curiosity. The directness of the question flustered Julian for a second. "Things are complicated." "No," Liam said. "They're actually very simple. But we can get to that. First, I believe you called this meeting to deal with me, so please. The floor is yours." He walked over to an empty armchair, placed the leather tube carefully on the floor beside it, and sat down. He steepled his fingers, waiting. His calm was unnerving. It was the calm of a man who knew all the cards in the deck. Arthur, recovering his composure, took over. "Liam, this marriage is over. It's clear it was a mistake from the start. Chloe is not suited to your lifestyle. We are prepared to be generous. We will allow you to walk away without any further financial obligations. The house, of course, will go to Chloe. Consider the down payment we provided as a final gift. Liam listened patiently until he was finished. He didn't react. He just nodded slowly. Generous. I see. He turned his gaze to his wife. Chloe, is this what you want? Chloe flinched, unable to meet his eyes. She stared at her hands, twisting a handkerchief. I don't know what I want, she whispered. Everything is such a mess. Cowardice, Liam stated, not as an insult, but as a diagnosis. He then turned back to Arthur and Julian. Before we discuss the terms of my surrender, he said, a faint, ironic smile touching his lips, I feel it's only fair to clear up a few misconceptions you seem to have about me. You've been operating under a set of false assumptions for years. I think it's time to provide you with some accurate data. He leaned forward slightly. For the past 5 years, you have treated me with a unique blend of condescension and contempt. You have mocked my profession, my income, my car, my principles. You did it at family dinners, at birthday parties, and in this very room when you offered me a job managing your janitors. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. This was his list of grievances, delivered not with passion, but with the cold precision of an auditor. You did all this because you believe that wealth is the only measure of a man. You judged me based on what you could see, and you saw nothing. You called my work designing sunrooms. You called my dreams of building skyscrapers a joke. You defined me as a failure, a gazelle in your jungle of lions. He looked from Arthur to Julian. Their faces had hardened. They were not used to being addressed this way. You operated on bad information, Liam continued, his voice dropping slightly, drawing them in. And in your world, Mr. Vance, he nodded at Arthur, and especially in yours, Julian, acting on bad information can be expensive. Just then, there was a polite knock on the study door. The housekeeper opened it. Excuse me, Mr. Vance. A Mr. Sterling is here to see Mr. O'Connell. Arthur and Julian exchanged a look of confusion. Arthur Vance knew exactly who Marcus Sterling was. He was a titan, a real estate developer whose name was synonymous with power and influence in the state. What on earth was he doing here? Send him in, Liam said, before Arthur could speak. Marcus Sterling entered the room. He was a man in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and an aura of immense, unshakable authority. He dwarfed everyone in the room, not in stature, but in presence. He nodded curtly at Arthur and Julian, his eyes barely registering them, before turning to Liam. Liam, Sterling said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. Sorry to interrupt. Carter called me. Said you might need a friendly face. Marcus, thank you for coming, Liam said, standing up to shake his hand. Perfect timing. We were just getting to the interesting part. Arthur found his voice. Marcus, what a surprise. I don't believe we've had the pleasure of seeing you since the governor's charity ball. Sterling looked at Arthur as if noticing him for the first time. Arthur, yes, your boy here. He gestured at Julian, was telling everyone who would listen that my new downtown project was a pipe dream. Julian went pale. He had indeed been bad-mouthing the Elysian Tower project for months, using it as a prime example of market overreach for his investors. Now, Liam said, taking control of the room again. Where were we? Ah, yes. Bad information. He bent down and picked up the leather tube. His movements were fluid, graceful. He walked to the center of the room, to the large mahogany desk. With a flick of his wrists, he unrolled the blueprints. They covered the entire surface of the desk, a stunning, intricate web of lines and renderings. It was a cross-section of a magnificent, spiraling skyscraper, a building that seemed to defy gravity to reach for the heavens. At the bottom right corner, in the title block, was the name of the project and the lead architect. Elysian Tower. Lead architect, Liam O'Connell, O'Connell Design Group. Developer, Sterling Properties. Silence. A profound, deafening silence descended upon the study. Julian stared at the blueprints, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked at Liam, then at Marcus Sterling, then back at the name on the plans. His brain, so quick and ruthless with numbers, struggled to process this new, impossible variable. Arthur stepped closer, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He squinted at the plans. "What is this?" he whispered, though he already knew. "That," Marcus Sterling said, stepping forward, "is the future of this city's skyline. And this," he clapped a hand on Liam's shoulder, "is the genius who designed it. Not just designed it, I might add. He's a silent partner. His firm owns a 15% stake in the entire $2 billion development." The number landed in the room like a physical blow. 15% of $2 billion. 300 million. The figure was so immense, so far beyond their conception of Liam's worth, that it simply did not compute. Liam looked at Julian. He saw the sweat beading on his brother-in-law's forehead. "You shorted the downtown commercial market, didn't you, Julian? You bet against this project. You told your investors it was a failure." Julian's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. His face, usually so ruddy and confident, had turned a sickly, waxy gray. He was a man watching his own execution. "Tomorrow morning," Liam continued, his voice as calm and steady as a surgeon's hand, "Mr. Sterling, the mayor, and I will be holding a press conference. We will be announcing that the Elysian Tower is not only fully funded, but that construction is set to begin in 2 weeks. The markets, I expect, will react strongly. Your short position will be liquidated in minutes. Given how leveraged your fund is, I imagine you'll be facing margin calls you cannot possibly meet." He then turned to Arthur. "And you, Arthur, that industrial wasteland you've been buying up options on? The land next to our tower?" He pointed to a section of the blueprint. "That's Phase 2, the Elysian Residences and Promenade. My contract with Mr. Sterling gives me the right of first refusal to acquire that entire parcel. My lawyer, Mr. Carter, is currently drafting the notice of my intent to exercise that right at the pre-development valuation. Your options, I'm afraid, will expire worthless. All that capital you've tied up, it's gone." The two men, the lions of the jungle, stood there, utterly defeated. Their entire world, built on a foundation of arrogance and bad information, had been demolished in the space of 5 minutes. The gazelle had turned out to be a dragon. Julian finally found his voice, a strangled, desperate croak. "No, you can't. This will ruin me. This will ruin us." Liam looked at him, and for the first time, a flicker of emotion showed in his eyes. It was not triumph. It was not anger. It was a profound, weary pity. "You did this to yourself, Julian. You built your house on sand. You thought the whole world was a game you could win through bullying and contempt. You were wrong." He turned his gaze at last to Chloe. She was staring at him, her face a maelstrom of shock, horror, and a dawning, terrible understanding. She was seeing him for the first time, not the struggling artist her family pitied, but the giant they had tried to chain. She saw the man she had betrayed, the man she had failed to defend, and she finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. "As for the house," Liam said, his voice now soft, directed only at her, "my lawyer has also drawn up a separation agreement. It's quite generous. It grants you the house, the car, and significant alimony. All you have to do is sign it." He let that hang in the air. The offer was a test, a final, devastating test. He was offering her the very things her family had always valued, the material comforts they believed were her birthright. He was giving her the chance to choose their world, or to choose him. Arthur and Julian were now pleading. The transformation was grotesque. The arrogant masters of the universe were reduced to babbling, desperate men. "Liam, son, please," Arthur stammered, his face ashen. "We could talk about this. There must be a way. A deal. We can make you a partner at Vance Consolidated. A real partner. Executive, vice president." The offer was so pathetic, so tone-deaf in its desperation, that Liam almost smiled. They still didn't get it. They were trying to buy him with the same currency they had always used, not understanding that he operated in a different economy entirely. Julian was even more direct. "Don't do this, Liam. Please. I'll be ruined. My career, my life, it's over. I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll..." I'll pay you. Pay me, Liam said, the quiet irony back in his voice. With what, Julian? The money you're about to lose? You have nothing that I want. He looked past them, his gaze settling once more on Chloe. She hadn't moved. She was frozen, trapped in the wreckage of her life. The man she had married was a stranger, a man of immense power and substance whom she had treated like a child. The family she had always deferred to were revealed as hollow, desperate fools. The press conference is at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Liam said to the room at large. The market opens at 9:30. That's how long you have. He began to slowly, methodically roll up the blueprints. The sound of the paper sliding against the polished wood was the only sound in the room. Wait, Chloe cried out, her voice raw. She finally stood up, taking a hesitant step toward him. Liam, I'm so sorry. He paused, the blueprint tube in his hands. He looked at her, his eyes searching her face. Sorry for what, Chloe? He asked, his voice genuinely curious. Are you sorry you got caught? Or are you sorry you did it? I'm sorry for everything, she sobbed. For not defending you. For listening to them. For being weak. For hurting you. I was a coward. You were right. I was a coward. It was the first honest thing she had said in years. He saw in her eyes not just the terror of her situation, but a flicker of genuine remorse, of self-awareness. It was a tiny spark in a vast darkness, but it was there. He gave a single, slow nod. The separation agreement is on the hall table. The choice is yours. He turned to Marcus Sterling. Marcus, thank you for your support. Anytime, my boy, the developer rumbled, giving him a supportive pat on the back. You handled that with class. Liam walked out of the study without a backward glance. He left them there, the three of them, in the opulent room that had been their seat of power, now transformed into a tomb of their own making. He walked down the long hallway, his limp barely noticeable. He saw the envelope on the hall table, the one containing the separation agreement Ben Carter had couriered over. He didn't slow down. He walked out the grand oak doors and into the cool night air, leaving the choice and the consequences entirely in her hands. The days that followed were a blur of controlled chaos. The press conference for the Legion Tower was a sensation. Liam, standing on the podium next to the mayor and Marcus Sterling, was revealed to the world. He spoke with eloquence and passion about his vision for the building, not just as a structure of glass and steel, but as a piece of living art designed to elevate the human spirit. He was no longer the invisible man. His face was on the front page of the business section, his name spoken with reverence on financial news networks. As he had predicted, the market reaction was immediate and violent. The announcement acted like a tidal wave, lifting the entire downtown commercial real estate sector. For Julian Vance, it was a tsunami. His massively leveraged short positions were annihilated. The margin calls came within the first hour of trading. By noon, Vance Capital was insolvent. By the end of the day, it was in receivership. Julian lost everything. His clients' money, his personal fortune, his Maserati, his seat at the top of the food chain. He was ruined, not just financially, but reputationally. He was the laughingstock of the financial world, the man who had bet against a sure thing, the Icarus who had flown too close to a sun he hadn't even seen. Arthur Vance's fate was a slower, quieter, but no less devastating collapse. Liam's exercise of his land options for Phase 2 of the Elysian project rendered Vance Consolidated's recent acquisitions worthless. The capital they had tied up was gone, and the loss triggered covenants on their corporate loans. Banks called in their debts. The company, which had been teetering for years, propped up by its reputation rather than its performance, began to crumble. Arthur was forced to sell off assets at fire sale prices simply to stay afloat. He lost control of the company his father had built. The Vance empire was effectively dismantled, not by a hostile takeover, but by the quiet, inevitable consequences of its own hubris. Liam took no pleasure in their destruction. He watched it from a distance, with the dispassionate eye of an architect observing a controlled demolition. It was the necessary clearing of a blighted structure to make way for something new. His actions had not been born of a desire to punish. but of a need to establish a new foundation based on truth. The real question, the one that occupied his thoughts in the quiet moments, was Chloe. He had returned to their home after leaving the Vance estate, and he had waited. He didn't know what he wanted her to do. Part of him, the wounded part, wanted her to sign the papers, to take the easy way out and disappear from his life, proving she was truly her family's daughter. But another part, a deeper part that still remembered the woman he had fallen in love with, hoped she would fight. He hoped she would reject the world of empty materialism and choose the harder path of redemption. She came home 2 days later. He was in his office, sketching, when he heard her key in the door. She didn't call out his name. He heard her quiet footsteps move through the house. He waited. After a few minutes, she appeared in the doorway of his office. She was not crying. Her face was pale, her eyes were shadowed, but she was composed. In her hand, she held the envelope containing the separation agreement. It was torn in half. She walked into the room and placed the two halves on his desk. "This isn't the answer," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Liam looked up from his drafting table, his charcoal pencil still in his hand. "What is the answer, Chloe?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But it starts with me telling you that I love you, and that I failed you. Completely. I was so caught up in their world, in their definition of success, that I couldn't see the giant standing right in front of me. I let them diminish you, and by staying silent, I diminished myself. I broke our marriage, Liam. Not just with what happened with Julian, but long before that. Every time I didn't defend you. Every time I asked you to be smaller, so they would be more comfortable." She took a deep breath. "I don't want the house if you're not in it. I don't want the money. I don't want any of it. All I want is a chance. A chance to earn back your trust. A chance to be the wife you deserve. The partner you should have had all along." He studied her face, searching for the familiar patterns of manipulation or desperation. He found none. He saw, instead, a woman who had been stripped of all her illusions and was finally, painfully, seeing herself clearly. She was not the weak, cowed woman from her father's study. She was someone new, someone forged in the fire of this crisis. "Trust isn't a switch you can flip, Chloe," he said softly. "I know," she replied, tears welling in her eyes, but not falling. "I know it might take years. It might never come back completely. But I have to try. I have to show you that I choose you. I choose this life. Our life. Not theirs." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. In the distance, he could see the construction cranes that would soon rise on the Elysian site. He had reshaped the city. Could he reshape a marriage? Could a foundation that had been so badly cracked be repaired? Could it be made stronger than before? An architect knows that sometimes the most beautiful structures are the ones that have been retrofitted, reinforced, the ones that bear the honest scars of their past. They have a history, a story. He turned back to her. "My parents are coming to visit next month," he said. "They're simple people, Chloe. My dad was a carpenter. My mom was a librarian. Their house is small. The food is plain. There will be no talk of acquisitions or Patek Philippe watches." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "I'd like that," she whispered. "They will want to see the woman their son loves," he continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Not the daughter of Arthur Vance. Can you be that woman?" "I can be me," she said. "The real me. The one who got lost along the way. I want you to meet her too." It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a happy ending. It was a beginning. A difficult, uncertain beginning. It was the first day of a long, slow, painstaking reconstruction project. But for the first time in a long time, Liam felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He walked over to her and took the torn pieces of the agreement from her hand. He dropped them into the wastebasket. He didn't touch her, not yet. But he looked at her, and for the first time since he'd found the watch, he truly saw his wife again. In the months that followed, the world shifted. Julian, stripped of his wealth and status, disappeared from their lives. Liam heard through a third party that he was living in a small apartment, working a low-level sales job, a ghost of the man he once was. Arthur, having lost his company, was forced into a quiet retirement, his days of holding court over. Liam and Chloe attended one final, tense family dinner, where Arthur, a diminished and humbled man, offered a stiff, formal apology. It was the best he was capable of, and Liam accepted it with grace. The era of the Van Cess was over. The reconstruction of their marriage was a quiet, deliberate process. Chloe threw herself into it with a fierce dedication. She went to therapy. She cut ties with the toxic friends from her old life. She started volunteering at Youth Art Center, using her gallery experience to help underprivileged kids. She stopped trying to fill their perfect house with perfect things and started trying to fill it with warmth and laughter. She learned to listen. She learned to defend. One evening, when a snide comment was made about Liam's humble origins at a gallery opening, Chloe had turned on the speaker with a calm ferocity that left Liam stunned and, for the first time in a very long time, truly proud of her. He learned to trust again, piece by piece. It was in the small moments. The way she would bring him coffee in his study without being asked. The way she would listen for hours as he talked about the complex physics of cantilevered structures. The way she held his hand as they walked through the city, her grip sure and steady. One crisp autumn evening, nearly a year after that terrible night, Liam took Chloe to the Elysian Tower construction site. The foundation was laid, and the steel skeleton was beginning to climb, a magnificent web against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. They stood there, two small figures in the shadow of his creation. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice filled with genuine awe. "It's even more incredible than the drawings." "The foundation is the most important part," Liam said, looking up at the soaring steel beams. "You can't see it. It's not glamorous. It's just tons of concrete and rebar buried in the earth. But nothing else is possible without it. If the foundation is weak, the whole thing comes down." She understood what he was really saying. She slipped her hand into his. "Our foundation was weak," she said softly. "I made it weak, but we're rebuilding it. On better ground." He squeezed her hand. "Yes," he said, "we are." He looked at her, at the woman who had walked through fire and come out changed. He saw not the ghost of her betrayal, but the strength of her redemption. He had learned that true strength wasn't about never falling. It was about how you rose. And true worth wasn't about the grand towers you built, but about the quiet foundations you tended to every day. They stood there for a long time, watching the lights of the city twinkle on around them, two people who had been broken apart and were now, slowly, carefully, building something new together. Something stronger. Something designed to last. It's a powerful thing, isn't it? To realize that sometimes the greatest act of strength is not to demolish, but to rebuild. To offer a second chance, not just to someone else, but to yourself. To believe in the possibility of redemption. What do you think? Could you have done what Liam did? Could you have found it in you to forgive and rebuild? I'd be fascinated to read your thoughts on this down in the comments. Your stories and perspectives are what make this community so special. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you found value in this story, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice, redemption, and the quiet strength of the human heart. Until next time, be kind, be strong, and never underestimate the power of a solid foundation.